and I have served as archivist for Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia since 2001. Episcopal High School is also known as Episcopal EHS or the high school. Prior to joining Episcopal, I was with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, as well as the Textile Museum. For me, one of the joys of working in a school environment is the opportunity to collaborate to support compelling projects for our students. This work would not be possible without the support of our faculty and the school. For Episcopal, the archive serves as the institutional repository for materials related to the history of EHS. As such, we collect those materials generated by the activities of school life, as well as accepting donations of materials directly connected to a student or teacher's experience at EHS, such as correspondence between a student and his family or scrapbooks. Engaging with our students not only supports their learning, but also informs my collecting decisions by helping me understand the rhythms of life at the school and its changes over time. Since most folks, even some affiliated with Episcopal High School, are surprised to learn that we have an archivist on staff, I decided to start with some background about the history of our school. Our collection obviously documents the history of our institution, but in doing so also serves as a resource on early education in America. We were founded in 1839 and were under the governance of the Virginia Theological Seminary until 1923, which means that some of our early institutional records, such as Board of Trustee minutes, are held by this neighboring repository. At the time, educational opportunities in the Commonwealth of Virginia were limited, and the leaders of VTS were concerned that students were not sufficiently prepared to pursue seminary education, so there was some self-interest in the decision to establish EHS. In the early years, it was not uncommon for a student to matriculate to the seminary straight from EHS, but over time, the focus of each individual diverged to the point that Episcopal was made independent of the seminary in 1923. Episcopal served the planter class and in its early days was very much a Southern school, with most of the student body hailing from Virginia and North Carolina, although some students came from as far away as Louisiana and China. Episcopal High School played a formative role in the early development of American education. For example, Episcopal's head of school from 1870 to 1913, Lancelot Blackford, made trips to England during the summers to learn from the practices of British boarding schools such as Eton and apply them to Episcopal, one example being athletics. While hard to imagine today, prior to the Civil War, athletics were seen by educators as an indulgence to be discouraged, if not outright prohibited. But Lancelot Blackford was an early advocate of sports, recognizing their value and burning off youthful energy, and more importantly, imparting values of hard work and teamwork. During the early years of EHS athletics, the only interscholastic teams were football, baseball, and track and field. In this football team photo, you may notice how young the boys look, and that's because at the time, Episcopal did not follow a traditional four-year course of study that we associate with high school. Because educational opportunities were so limited at the time, we would have boys enrolling as young as the age of 10, with exceptions being made to enroll younger if you had an older sibling at the school. And this baseball team photo is one of our earliest photos in our collection. Photography equipment at the time was so expensive that photos like this were actually taken in photography studios. Episcopal's early history actually precedes the establishment of the school, as the oldest campus buildings were built by Eliza Parke Custis Law, granddaughter of Martha Washington and step-granddaughter of George Washington. I found different ways to build interest in our collection. In addition to leveraging our alumni magazine, a low-cost way to connect with our alumni and current families, I have developed a series of exhibits to share the history of our school and build interest in our collection. My first exhibit is this 24-panel exhibit with a couple of freestanding vitrines in Bryan Library, the school's original library and current home to the school's archives. This exhibit is laid out thematically with the thinking that unlike a traditional museum exhibition, folks are not necessarily in the space to take in the entire exhibit, but by taking a thematic approach, an individual can read a panel or two and get something out of the experience and hopefully come back for more. It is always satisfying to hear from our young alumni reflecting on their favorite panels that they would read while studying in Bryan Library. We also have an exhibit in our athletic center dedicated to the history of sports at Episcopal with 15 cases, each dedicated to a sport, as well as a touchscreen database of our varsity athletic teams and a video. My most recent exhibit is dedicated to each of the EHS heads of school from over the years. We held a collection of portraits of each of our school heads, but did not have the space to meaningfully display them. With the remodel of an academic building several years ago, I recognized the opportunity to hang all the portraits in a single quarter, and as a bonus, we have the space to include an interpretive panel for each portrait, sharing background on each individual's tenure, and my favorite element, a campus view from the relevant time period. Although exhibit projects can be expensive and a significant time commitment, I consider these exhibits to be worth it, particularly in light of the outreach they accomplish. Considering the time and expense of producing exhibits, my strategy is to develop permanent exhibits that can be updated. For example, with the retirement of a head of school and using my pieces for the magazine to cover more topical events such as pandemics and healthcare. As I explained previously, in its early years, Episcopal served the planner class. But given our history of enslavement, our repository supports research into the history of enslavement within our institution and more broadly. We have a historian on staff who, in addition to teaching, is researching our school's history of enslavement, and our repository is essential to his work. It is the right thing to do, and there is keen interest in the subject within our community and more broadly. Oscar Payne was an enslaved man who was hired out to Episcopal by his enslaver, a local woman named Mary Dade. On the right, you can see a page from an EHS ledger book documenting the payments made by Episcopal's head of school. On the left, you can see the runaway slave ad for Oscar Payne that was placed in the Baltimore Sun in 1855. The archives has supported other diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, including Episcopal's 50th anniversary of integration, which included symposia. And because MLK Day is not a school holiday, that day is devoted to DEI programming, which includes workshops for our students using our archival holdings of relevance to diversity. So why support student research? The most obvious reason, of course, is research skills, but I've found other reasons to support our students in their research. In particular, the enthusiasm that our students bring to the act of conducting original research. And not only are they enthusiastic about their own projects, but I find that they enthusiastically support each other's research. For example, last semester, a student who is the current editor-in-chief of this year's yearbook, The Whispers, and was researching the history of the student publication, would point out relevant photos to a classmate who was researching racial integration. This group of students from last year's digital history class, in which each student devotes the semester to taking a deep dive into a topic of interest, shares what they learn with presentations and the creations of websites detailing their research, hence the name Digital History. Last fall's group was so supportive and such a tight-knit group that they even nicknamed themselves the Die High subgroup and created an entry for themselves in this year's edition of the yearbook. This work also allows us to share the history of our school with our students. And as an archivist, I am particularly committed to taking advantage of this opportunity to impart proper artifact handling and care with our students. Obviously, we instruct our students in best practices of artifact handling, such as only using pencils and making sure bound volumes are supported. But it is still possible to be surprised despite our students' best intentions. one day, one of our students came into the research room, I kid you not, carrying a chocolate ice cream cone. And, our kids do get very excited for soft serve ice cream. And so when he came walking in, I just I looked at him, pointed at the ice cream cone, and said he'd have to take that outside. No muss, no fuss. He, took the ice cream cone outside, threw it away in an outside trash can, which I appreciated, and came right back to start his research. So my hope is that by the time my colleagues at the university level encounter our students, proper artifact handling will be second nature. And as you can see here, we have our students leave their drinks in a hallway outside the research room. Typically, the first couple of sessions, students have to be reminded, but I'd say by the third session, it's normally second nature. We also see these projects as an opportunity for our students to practice and develop their presentation skills. Our faculty often have our students present on the findings of their research, and as a matter of fact, following this session, I will be attending the presentations by students from a history class who each devoted the semester to researching a topic using our archival holdings. I also do this so I can introduce students to our profession. I love being an archivist, and it is an honor to share our profession with our students. The nature of boarding school life presents a challenge in terms of hosting interns, as our daily schedule leaves our students with precious free time. But I have had success in hosting student interns in the summer, specifically to help with oral history cataloging. I've found success in getting our students up to speed quickly because they already know our school so well and they find the interviews to be fascinating. I also see value in this work in nudging our students beyond their comfort zones. I don't know if any of you have high school students in your lives, either professionally or as your own children, but I have noticed high school students seem to feel a real reluctance to call someone they do not know on the phone. So when relevant to a student's project, I try to connect the student with an alumnus or former teacher who shares that interest. These students enrich their projects with oral history interviews that contribute to the historical record while doing something we likely take for granted, initiating a phone call. And our alumni and former faculty love hearing from our current students. Student research also benefits our institution. For example, last semester, one of our students was researching Letty Pate Evans, a significant benefactor who is also of interest from a women's history point of view. The student's research will inform an interpretive garden that the school will be constructing in her honor. Here, Mike Reynolds, an exceptionally popular U.S. history teacher at Episcopal and our school historian, introduces his students to the school archives and its resources with an antebellum ledger book. The vast majority of our U.S. history classes engage with our school archives, whether it is a survey course attending a presentation on our school's history and holdings, to research-intensive classes such as Mike's class, History of Place, EHS, Virginia, and DC, in which a student devotes an entire semester to pursuing an area of research using our materials. The archives. We're not just here for the history department. Not surprisingly, our history department is the heaviest user of our repository, but other departments also use our archival resources in their curriculum. For example, when teaching J.D. Saliger's The Catcher in the Rye, to place context around the smoking lounge referenced in the book, one of our English teachers explains that Episcopal also had a smoking lounge at the time that went by the name Egypt. Egypt's smoking group, Episcopal Smoking Group Egypt, was so well established, they even got a page in the yearbook that you can see here. I've even collaborated with our fine arts department, with our photography teacher incorporating old and recent photographs into a series of works commissioned by the school. And we are in the process of developing a lesson about the history of photography, which will incorporate everything from our earliest daguerreotypes, glass plate negatives, and panorama images to current digital photography. In the spirit of reaching out to unexpected audiences, I cannot overstate how much fun I had over the years presenting to the third grade class of my children's elementary school. So throw the net wide when it comes to sharing and collaborating. How does Episcopal support student projects? First and foremost, faculty enthusiasm and buy-in. The importance of faculty buy-in cannot be overstated. Our students dedicate valuable class time. Our teachers dedicate valuable class time for our students to conduct research, and our teachers talk up our holdings with zeal. Block scheduling. When most of us were in high school, our classes met 5 times per week for maybe 40 or 50 minutes each. With the change to block scheduling at Episcopal, 2 class sessions run for an hour and 15 minutes per week in addition to a shorter session. These longer sessions allow for meaningful blocks of time for conducting research. As we all know, pulling and returning materials to archival storage takes time, as does getting started for the researcher. Also, having a proper research room. Prior to the archives move in 2010, accommodating student researchers, or really any researchers, was challenging. With the move to Bryan Library, I now have the space to accommodate an entire classroom of students in a centrally located building. So what topics are our students researching? Really, from this list, you can see it runs the gamut. Of particular interest these days is the experience of Asian students at Episcopal. Shortly, we'll see one of my favorite images, which is a circa 1895 image of students on dorm, which includes one of our first Chinese students. But our students also have found compelling the buildings. Oh, here we go. Great. Thank you. This photo has always fascinated me because at this time, photography was still really expensive. And so the school limited its photography to sports teams and photos of, student groups like our student leaders, the monitors. So this photo is really exceptional because it's a group of students on dorm in their pajamas, and front and center is, you'll see one of our first Chinese students, which is compelling to both our Chinese students and their families. Racial integration has really become a topic of strong interest, as well as coeducation. I have a student right now who's researching the dress code. Also the sport of football, one of our oldest sports offered here. So this is a circa 1900 football helmet worn by an EHS student. And this object has become increasingly compelling with the growing interest in protecting students from head injuries. Sport of lacrosse, enslavement, the rat system, which was actually a formalized system of hazing, which is no longer practiced, thank goodness. This is a subject where our students conducting oral history interviews has been really helpful for rounding out the historic record, because there isn't a lot in the official record about the rat system. And of course, both World Wars and the Civil War. Our literary societies, which competed in areas such as debate, public speaking, and also served as libraries for the students in the early years of the school. Then also the honor code. Episcopal is very proud of its honor code, and so our students get very excited to see this 1857 math exam, which contains our earliest honor code reference. And finally, a lot of students come in to conduct research into family history. It's not uncommon for an Episcopal student to be one in a long line of family members to attend. And our students are often eager to learn about their parents' and grandparents' experience at the school. So in addition to traditional research papers, some students publish their projects to the web using Omeka, a web publishing platform for the display of archival materials. The flexibility of this tool enables our students to post a wide variety of materials, including audio and video. Feel free to check out some of our students' projects with this link. So at a school like ours, it's easy to assume that the way we do things now is how we always have, but the archives shows our community this is not necessarily the case. With the bonfire is a perfect example. These days, the bonfire is a tightly controlled event. Students no longer build or light the bonfire, presumably for liability reasons. And there's now a heavy fire department presence. But back in the day, as you can see from this photo, the students took the lead and did so. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a week-long holiday for a community, but until well into the 1960s, Thanksgiving was not a day off, but rather was observed with a half day of classes followed by Thanksgiving dinner. The teachers, known as masters at the time, were responsible for carving a turkey for their students. Some teachers approached this with dread, while others relished the opportunity to show off their carving skills, even bringing their own carving sets to the dining hall. And school dances. While most students today are not familiar with dance cards, they were very much a part of school dances in the past. Our finals dance, known as prom elsewhere, was last weekend. Prior to coeducation in 1991, the students would usually attend with a date who attended school elsewhere. Today, while some students might attend as a couple with a fellow classmate, most students attend as groups of friends. And lastly, the monitors. The monitors are our student leader group. They might be thought of as the equivalent like student council at another school. So this is an example of the archives collaborating with our school leadership, including our head of school, by providing background to inform present day decisions. A few years ago, the school was exploring changing the structure and number of monitors, and I was able to provide a detailed history of how this group had evolved since the 1800s. So before we wrap up, I'd like to share a recent acquisition that I'm really excited about, a circa 1900 Chinese silver ship model. This object was given to Lancelot Blackford by one of his Chinese students from the 1890s upon that student's returned to the school as an alumnus to visit Mr. Blackford. This artifact is compelling to me because it is evidence of the lifelong connections our head of school formed with his students, and I am excited to see how our students interact with it. Before handing the presentation off to Harrison, I should mention that as a great-great-grandson of Lancelot Blackford, he was instrumental in making this happen. So thank you all for attending our presentation, and I'd like to share some of the thank you notes our students have written expressing their gratitude for conducting research in the archives. And of course, thank you to Merrick, which makes it possible for lone arrangers like myself to collaborate and exchange ideas with other archivists. Thank you especially to my co-presenter, Harrison Wick, for not only serving as the inspiration behind this presentation, but also being a colleague who expands my vision of what the archives can achieve.
Thank you, Laura. And good morning, everyone. I'm Harrison Wick, and since 2007, I have been the Special Collections Librarian and University Archivist at IUP, which is in Indiana, Pennsylvania, the hometown of Jimmy Stewart. I wanted to thank Laura Vetter and at Episcopal High School for this opportunity to co-present and to talk about collaboration and student engagement. One of the reasons I became an archivist was my family's background in education. And after earning my MLS, it's funny to think of, because when I think about it, I've always been an archivist. My great aunt Sally Bruce, Blackford McClatchy, painstakingly transcribed the journals of her grandfather, Dr. Lancelot Minor Blackford, from when he was principal at the Episcopal High School. So I've always known about EHS. And Aunt Sally Bruce went on to earn her MLS, and she was the reason I became an archivist. And this is really been a real, she is the reason I have really become very proactive about creating opportunities to collaborate and engage with our students. To give you a little bit of background, the IUP Special Collections and University Archives encompasses 4 types of collections. We have record groups, which are the institutional history of IUP, manuscript groups, which reflect the primary source documents donated by individuals and groups and businesses, including unions, and often associated with IUP history and regional history. We also have the Pennsylvania collection and the rare book collection, which features many rare examples of fine printing, including the complete works of Charles Darwin. Personally, I can't think of a better way to lead into a proactive discussion than talking with a group of archivists about student engagement in archives, but that's just me. This year, the IUP Special Collections and University Archives has answered more than 1,200 research requests from students, employees, community members, and visiting scholars. Bibliographic instruction is often the starting point for conversations with students and faculty about larger collaborative projects that have led to significant student engagement. We provide a lot of different activities to our students and the public. This often includes research with primary sources, talking about opportunities that we provide to the public, talking about outreach and including instruction and exhibits. And I often collaborate with our students and faculty in terms of presentations. Bibliographic instruction is a starting point, but this often leads to in-depth research. And we'll talk more about different activities, including Into the Archives, which has been a lot of fun, a new outreach series. We've also provided digitization services and preservation advice. We have many students who work for us, including interns, and they come from all walks of life. It's something that really does keep me young. It really does. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with our students. We've also, in addition to digitization, we also provide digital access to IUP publications and provide records management policies for the university and work with donors as well. This is a photograph of Dr. Charles Cashdaller, retired professor emeritus from the history department, who recently wrote a new history of IUP. I want to discuss also the benefits and challenges that I've encountered while completing collaborations. For many of us, the hardest part has been finding funding for large-scale projects, and at the same time also provide branding and marketing for recognition of the special collections and university archives. However, I really enjoy working with our students and faculty to bring programming and special collections to the forefront of outreach activities. Through successful programming and university recognition, the archives has developed further opportunities for collaboration with students, university employees, and the community. This has led to new initiatives, including the Social Justice Project that I'll talk about in more detail. And these ideas have opened new opportunities for funding as well, including institutional, state, and federal grants to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. My advice is, do not be disheartened about looking for funding to support your outreach activities. You just need to plan ahead for the expected and the unexpected. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, our virtual presentations and how this has been something that before the pandemic, I would have thought was very exciting and different. Today, I think we feel a little different. Of course, I have to admit I prefer meeting in person, but to think about how technology has changed and how we teach and can provide information to our students, it's remarkable. These are just a few of the bibliographic instruction sessions that I've presented recently. These have included time capsules, and we actually came across a time capsule in one of our buildings that was being raised, and these were some of the documents that were found in that time capsule from the 1970s. Our students just love this opportunity to learn from students from our past. Zoom has definitely changed our classroom, especially when it comes to the bibliographic instruction over the last 3 years. But at the same time, we're finding students want to meet more in person since the pandemic. Recently, I presented to a graduate class in anthropology about voyages of discovery, and this provided a new opportunity to share primary sources that we have in the Pennsylvania collection and our rare book collection, including this 1844 map of the Bay of Tokyo. So our students are always looking for new opportunities to collaborate in person. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Into the Archives. This is a special outreach series that we've conducted over the last 4 years now. We just we're preparing for our 10th Into the Archives, Shakespeare Unbound. And this has been a lot of fun. These presentations have been on and off campus, including new opportunities for outreach to our students. Many of these ideas have been brought to me by, they are developed from our archival collections and our rare book collections. And many of them also are inspired by student ideas and themes. And it's been a lot of fun to work with our students on different opportunities. This is a picture from one of our first Into the Archives called The Medievalists. And this featured original works as well as facsimiles. I've also been trying to connect our students with our rare book collections. And I'm really proactive about sharing our resources with our students and faculty in collaboration with the departments of history and English, anthropology, and sociology. I've incorporated instructional bibliographic instruction about rare books into courses. It's been a lot of fun. This project in particular focused on speculative science fiction. And we talked about the works of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. My personal favorites, the Time Machine. And I found that our students really want to learn more about the different editions of the same works. And this has brought in new ideas about what we can purchase with a small endowment that was created by one of my predecessors. One of our most recent new movie that's coming out about the Frank Herbert's Dune encouraged me to talk about speculative science fiction and how that can be interpreted on the big screen. And this book has been on film at least twice, although only one of them can be compared in with any relevance to the book. It's important to share these examples with our students and talk about the different editions of especially how they evolve from the first edition. I wanted to make a special case for the Isabel Wilkinson Green dining room, which the University Archives was asked to provide a lot of memorabilia to decorate. Isabel Wilkinson Green was one of our first students to receive an undergraduate degree from the class of 1927, 95 years ago, 96 years ago now. And this has been a real neat opportunity for us to also really get out of the archives and be able to do presentations in the Isabel Wilkinson Green. And it's been a lot of fun I want to point out that the dining room is actually a classroom for our students in hospitality management. And this has been a lot of fun to be able to share with our students memorabilia from almost 100 years ago. This is several events that we've had in the Allenwood. We had a Victorian lunch there, and that was a lot of fun to plan the menu and have our students present on Victorian literature and use especially the works of Charles Dickens. These are my students, Megan Cronin and Jordan Hansen, who helped us work. They are working on a collection for the historic costume collection, which is a really neat collaboration with the Department of Fashion Design. And that includes wardrobe from the back to the 1870s. And we've had several different events there. The Holidays in the Tropics was a lot of fun. That talked about several different activities that we've done, but I wanted to mention this is the works of Charles Darwin that we talked about in the Holidays in the Tropics. And we have IUP has a copy of The Origin of Species, which there were only 1,250 copies printed in the first edition. And this is the voyage of the HMS Beagle that Darwin was a part of. This the Holidays in the Tropics was a real special presentation. It was a Hawaiian themed lunch with displays from the historic costume collection, and which is part of fashion design. And we also brought out the first editions of Charles Darwin, and we talked about, my students talked about several other travel narratives as well, and different examples from the collection. The Into the Archives Unbound. These have been activities that have been outside of special collections. And it's grown in popularity. It's been a lot of fun to talk about different activities. The one on the left is Monsters and Mischief, which we had on Halloween a couple of years ago. And we were actually able to purchase, because of this presentation, we were able to, with a small endowment, we were able to purchase a book called The Essays on Witchcraft, which was printed in 1720. That is one of the first published accounts of the Salem witch trials of 1692. On the right is the 9th Into the Archives, which was Define the Divine. That was this spring. And I was able to bring together faculty and students who talked about world religions, including and rare books, including Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and paganism. And this special event was part of the 6 o'clock series, which was has brought a much larger and diverse audience of students and faculty. This presentation included students collaborating from the departments of English, History, Biology, Computer Science, and Business. This fall, I'm coordinating an Into the Archives called Shakespeare Unbound, and that will include students and faculty from the English department who will discuss their research about William Shakespeare. This, the Shakespeare Unbound presentation has encouraged me to work with our students and faculty to determine which publications we could purchase from our endowment that would really benefit Shakespeare Unbound. So we were able to purchase the first and fourth folios, facsimiles of the first and fourth folios that feature the comedies, histories, and dramas written by William Shakespeare. And I want to point out that a big part of Outreach has been working with our donors to try to build the William LaFranchi Endowment that has led to the purchase of many rare books that we've used in these presentations. I focused on a lot of different student-centered projects over the last 15 years, but this year I'm working on 3 different grants at the same time, and I have to tell you, 3 is a lot to do in 1 year. One of the most significant grants I've been working on is the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission HARC grant, which has been paid for the digitization and transcription of legacy oral history interviews documenting African-American women who worked in the glass industry in Jeanette, Pennsylvania. This grant was very well received by our administration, and they gave us additional funding to digitize and transcribe twice as many interviews as the grant originally paid for. So this has really provided new opportunities for our students that I'm very excited about presenting. We received a university grant to inventory the historic costume collection. And this is in collaboration with the fashion design department, and that led to our new grant to be able to document the IUP at 150, celebrating our sesquicentennial at IUP. And that'll include a special display from the historic costume collection. I've also worked on a very important project to document the COVID experience on campus and in the community. And this has been an entirely student-centered project where our students are recording and documenting and transcribing interviews. And this has also been a lot of fun to work with our students from very different disciplines, talk about possibilities for including research opportunities about COVID. So I've worked on a lot of different outreach activities, and including marketing, and I've also worked with art design to come up with ways to incorporate historic photographs like this image on the left that incorporates the Greek steps. And you'll see the old image and the new image. And I thought this was a really neat way to be able to combine new and old, and in a way help our students connect to students who were here over 100 years ago. And it's been also very important to explore and find and encourage new student projects that are focused on imagery, especially diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is focused on legacy collections. And presently, my students are actually working on digitizing our photograph collection, which is quite extensive, over 150 images. And this has led to new opportunities to collaborate with our students and faculty and to talk about how we can incorporate these primary sources into their courses and research interests. We have a lot of new collaborations going on, and one of them is talking about a new experiential learning center that'll be a satellite for special collections in an academic building. So we're hopeful that will take place soon. There's many opportunities for students to create internships that we have in special collections. This has been a lot of fun. I've been able to work with our current intern, McKenna Birkin, who is interested in becoming a mortician. And so she's had the opportunity to work on a new archival collection called the Oakland Cemetery Association Papers. And this project has included creating biographies of individuals and families of regional interest who are interned at Oakland Cemetery. And this includes many of the founders of IUP. This project was a unique collaboration between anthropology and history, and has really been a new opportunity for McKenna to be able to work with primary sources. It's been a lot of fun for her. And our students are working in many different grant projects, and we're getting hands-on experience. One of our students is really working on the social justice project. I'll talk about that in a second. The IUP Social Justice Project, this was started by Amber Lawrence, and she wanted to work for me in trying to document our first students. And I thought this was really important. This was a great opportunity for us to be able to share with our faculty and students about our first students. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, so on the left, we have Bianca Parker. She was our first African-American student to attend Indiana State Normal School, which was our school when it started. Normal schools were the beginning of teacher education. And Helen Dixon graduated the class in 1926. And we have many different photographs. And a lot of these projects have really stemmed from looking at our record groups and manuscript groups, but also looking at IUP publications. And Amber Lawrence's project has identified over 4,000 examples of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a very short time. So this is a very important project that is also leading to the new digitization of student organizations as well. And I want to point out that the Social Justice Project has encouraged me to to talk about this in professional development activities. And I recently presented at the National Council for History Education Conference in Salt Lake City. And it was a lot of fun to be able to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and finding primary sources to support students and faculty. It's been a lot of fun to work with our students on a variety of projects, but the historic costume collection has been a real opportunity to work with the art and design and fashion design department. And this has encouraged students from different areas to collaborate together and help us organize this collection. And it's also led to multiple grants and exhibits, and it'll eventually lead to the IUP at 150, which will be next year. But it's been a lot of fun to work with the head of the fashion design program, that's Dr. Janet Blood, and our students, including Divinity Grace Schultz and Megan Cronin, who have really helped us organize this collection. And the most recent grant has also purchased photo booths to allow us to really photograph and document the clothing and accessories that are part of this important collection. I think it's important to talk to you about the how we can engage our students in historic research. So the COVID has changed everything, and we went remote for 3 months in 2020. And I was asked by faculty to provide examples from how we can do historic research and comparative research to previous pandemics. And this include on campus, we had the 1918 flu pandemic, and this closed our school for 2 months. I had the opportunity to work with faculty in history and student affairs and anthropology to incorporate different primary sources into our into their coursework that was remote for a time. This is on the right is an image of Norm, our mascot. Norm is Crimson Hawk, and he's not named Norm because we were originally Indiana Normal School. On the left is a nurse's record from that belonged to Bertha Gary, who was a student here in 1918, and she contracted the flu, and this was posted on her dorm room. Documenting COVID-19 has been a very important project since the beginning. So as of now, I've collected over 91 gigabytes of documentation, including 32 oral history interviews. This has been a really interesting project. We received a grant, an IUP mini grant, to collect oral history interviews with students, faculty, and community members and alumni, recent alumni. And this has been a completely student-run project. They interview people, they could transcribe the interviews, and they set up the interviews. And I want to point out that, and my colleague Laura Vetter mentioned how our students may initially find it challenging to coordinate interviews by calling someone that they have never met or spoken to. But our students have really warmed up to the idea, and it's giving them a new calling for being a part of our presentations and collaborating with our students, and to be able to talk to faculty about how we can include this material in courses and assignments. And it's been very interesting to record the interviews and have them as part of our archival collections as well. So I continue to learn from our students and about their COVID experiences. And it's really helped our students to become better scholars. For example, the idea of like I was mentioning about students contacting people that they had never met to interview them. Well, that takes a real special extrovert when it comes down to it. We have 3 students involved in the grant project, and it's been a lot of fun to see them grow and talk to and contact perfect strangers, people that they had never met. Interviews have included the university president, And interviewing the university president, that might be considered daunting to some. But our students agree that this project has been a rewarding experience that has helped them communicate better, and it's something they can put on their resume as well. This is also our project to document COVID-19 has also helped students identify other students and people to interview about their experiences. So the project continues. During COVID-19, we've been asked to talk about different projects that are really old ideas for new student projects. And I'm reminded of the diaries of Belua Johns, who was an Army nurse in 3 wars. She served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And it's been very interesting. This project started out as a transcription project, and eventually we digitized all of the interviews to be able to help students work with handwriting and transcription during COVID, but also now to be able to compare to primary resources. And students have actually gotten into projects where they've created their own journals and journaling projects. And this is something that I personally identify with because I've kept a journal since I was about 10 years old. Scrapbooking is also something that's been a lot of fun for our students to work with, especially learning from students from more than 100 years ago. We have over 100 scrapbooks, and we've digitized many of them, but we've also worked with our students to be able to talk to them about different opportunities about how they can create scrapbooks about their time here, or let's say about COVID. And this is also, it was very interesting. Students wanted to create video projects, and I've collected those as part of the archives as well. And it's included a lot of digitization of primary sources and to be able to compare resources that they've used in courses. It's been a lot of fun. And several of these video projects you can view on YouTube. I've had a lot of opportunity to curate in-person and virtual exhibits with the University Museum and be a part of different activities. It's been a lot of fun. This has been a real opportunity for our students to participate with the archives and other departments on campus as well. This is an image we used for the IUP history exhibit in 2012. And I want to point out that the Oak Grove is a central. I called the exhibit Through the Oak Grove. The Oak Grove is a central part of campus that's a green space that's existed since the beginning, the 1870s. And it's been a lot of fun to work with our students on projects like this. And that leads me to talk about Print Matters, the selected works of Ed Kolker. Ed Kolker is a remarkable individual. He's 96 years young. He's a World War II combat vet who was stationed in Italy in 1945. He is a retired provost of the SUNY system, and he and his wife, Elaine Galen, have continued to print limited edition folios at the Haybarn Press. And their unique combination of poetry and imagery brings together themes, international themes of peace, warfare, equality, and injustice and violence. I use the title Print Matters as a play on words, talking about the importance of the printed word, especially when this became a remote exhibit. And working with Ed Kolker, it's been a real opportunity, I have to tell you. This is just one of the examples of poetry and art combined. This is from their work with Holocaust poet Abraham Stutzgeber in Beneath the Trees in 2003. And this is an interesting depiction of how Jewish partisan fighters near the Vilna ghetto were forced to break into the Rom press to steal lead plates that were used to print the Torah. melt down into lead bullets so they could be used to fight the Nazis. And it was a desperate action, but this was a very poignant image that I wanted to share with you. We have many new opportunities for our students today, and I'm very pleased to say that I work with just the best students, and it just makes me want to. This is the reason I became an archivist. I have to tell you, they work on so many different projects right now. We have a graduate assistantship with our doctoral students in English. They provide, they help us with programming for the Into the Archives. And this has led to many, many new projects, including the IUP Social Justice Project. And I'm very happy to tell you that this year I've had the work with the most diligent undergraduate and graduate students that I have ever worked with as an archivist. And perhaps it's the result of the pandemic, but I believe their genuine interest and dedication in the archival profession is why I work in education. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity, and I wanted to thank Laura Vetter for presenting with me. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We've had a few questions come in already, but if anyone would like to add their questions for Laura or Harrison into the Q&A function at the bottom, please feel free, and I will read those to them now. Laura did go ahead and answer one of the questions that came in already in the chat, so I'll just make sure that people see that regarding the collecting of oral histories. So I'll get started with one question, which was for both of you. You both talked about oral histories as an important part with your students. Are the students getting training in advance? Are they getting trained in classes? What kind of advanced training besides them learning to call people on the phones are they getting?
I'll start with, it depends on the nature of the interview. Like if it's an official oral history interview that's going to be entered into the archives and we're going to be transcribing it, then I will sit down with the student and give them training. And some of it is stuff that's like second nature for us, but is really important. And when they go to start the interview, I send them with an index card that I print out, and it has 3 instructions. Turn on the camera, state the date, and state your name and your interview subject's name and class year. You know, which for us is second nature, but I have found that sometimes it doesn't happen, and then I have to go back through the through the paperwork to find out, you know, who the interview was with. But if they're just going to call someone on the phone and it's going to be kind of a specific call for their project, with those, you know, we're not necessarily getting them transcribed. They're not necessarily being entered into the archives. And so with that, I feel like whatever the student is comfortable with, they've normally exchanged some emails with the person they're calling. So I tend to stay out of the way for those.
For me, it's very similar. So it depends on the project. If we are talking about the COVID-19 grant to collect oral history interviews, we've worked with our oral history faculty member in the history department, Dr. Erin Conlon, and she's provided training for our student interviewers. And we also use training manuals from that she's provided from different oral history interview standards, and that's been very important. And I've really enjoyed working with our students to help them interview people and to also schedule interviews with. It was very important to try to collect from different very diverse backgrounds for people we were interviewing. The challenge has been that it's also led to more interviews, and so it's grown and continues to grow. My biggest problem with legacy interviews are the media, the technological obsolescence that we've run into with audio cassette tapes, especially. That's something that I'm trying to work on. I'm hopeful to digitize and convert all of those to a digital format from the analog.
Great. In Laura's presentation, it was mentioned that you're educating students on why food and drink are not allowed in the reading room. So what other strategies are you both using to reinforce collection handling processes? And are you experiencing any pushback from faculty or students?
Pushback is really rare. I mean, in all the years I've been doing this, I've only had one student push back, and actually it was this semester. You know, our students are really enthusiastic to work with our holdings. And I do, you know, in the main library, which is a separate building, students are allowed to bring, you know, drinks in if there's a lid or a cap. You know, and I just explained that, like, in the main library, if you spill your drink, the librarians can order a replacement. They won't be happy about it, but they can do it. Whereas, you know, you're probably handling the only copy. And you know, and I think so I think part of it is, you know, our students and their respect for the work that they're doing. And I also credit our faculty. I mean, our faculty, they put their drinks on the same table as the students do. So, you know, leading by example.
That's exactly what we do too. We have shelving, and we also have cubby holes for yeah, a separate area for drinks and their bags as well. Anything that they bring in, they can use digital camera. Digital camera. That's dating me. Their phone to take images of the primary sources they're working with. It's very interesting. This semester, one of my doctoral students who was working with me, she actually, we had a researcher who came in, and my GA came out and said, you can't have that water out. And it was kind of refreshing to not be the one who had to say that to the student. It's very nice to see our student employees and the people who work here to be able to help us you know, monitor that. But Laura's right. A lot of these documents are extremely rare. I mean, they can be one of a kind, and you spill something on that, and you might ruin it. You might destroy it altogether. And it's very different in the main library, which is just outside in the stacks.
So coming out of the pandemic, are either of you finding your audience wants more or less digital access to archival exhibits or presentations?
I mean, I think here, you know, and part of this might be the fact that we are all boarding, and, you know, the relationships are really tight. Like, yes, the students have their digital lives, but there is a real enthusiastic for the, you know, say, like, original ledger, or, you know, photos that I've digitized, and, you know, to kind of expedite things for student, you know, I'll just send photos that I've scanned in some cases. But, you know, to pull out the original photo, there's just such a, you know, you would think that I'm pulling out like a, you know, a piece of like the true cross or something. You know, there's a real enthusiasm for that. So you know, and being all boarding, the students are here on campus, and so I feel like there's less demand for like a remote or digital experience, even though, you know, some of our collections are digitized.
It's been a very similar experience. It's a bit of a mix for me, I guess. I'm finding that our students want digital access. Is the faculty and the faculty want our students to have a more in-person experience. And I think our students genuinely want that too. But there's definitely a convenience factor to having it digitized. But at the same time, I'm hesitant to provide complete digital content because, and this is probably a topic for a whole another presentation, but for example, with Chat GTP and other AI, your only opportunity for real interaction without any interference from that is archival material and primary sources. And that's because your faculty can incorporate something that's unique. And if you digitize that, well, that kind of changes things. But it's also something you can't very well create using AI. You have to have them in person to talk about, well, use something from the archives and present on that to me. And that's very different experience. And it's been a lot of fun to work with our students, both in person and remotely. But I have to think, I think they really do want it to be in person.
Could you both talk about how you plan your projects? Do other departments or teachers approach you with ideas, or do you come up with an idea and approach a potential collaborator, or is it a little bit of both?
I would say here it's, both or all of the above. I feel like some of the best ideas evolve as a teacher and I are talking. For example, the history of photography lesson. I mean, I can't say that's something that I came up with independently, but in talking with our photography teacher about our holdings, we kind of, came up with this idea together. I have to say that the idea of our English faculty incorporating our materials, that would have never occurred to me. In that case, this English teacher came to me and I was like, oh, that is brilliant. So yeah, I'd say it's a mixed bag here.
I agree. For me, I'm very proactive. I love getting the word about the archives and special collections out there. But how many times have we experienced where you're told, oh, I didn't know we had an archives. I mean, I've been here for 15 years and we've had an archivist officially since 1980. And yeah, there's no excuse for but it's definitely although I'm excited about getting the word out there, and I do send regular communications to the faculty, it's really refreshing to be able to get new ideas from our faculty and our students to promote different aspects of the special collections. It's been a lot of fun to be able to work with very different departments. English and history are our backbone, but anthropology and sociology and fashion design, that was something that I didn't know about until our students started to come to me and talk about the historic costume collection. And then I realized that would just be an excellent opportunity to work on with grants. And it's been really wonderful to collaborate with our students and faculty, and students just have new and fresh ideas that have really led to a lot of opportunities for professional development and grant writing too. They really have.
So there's been a lot of detailing about student projects inspired creating work with the archive. For those that are hosted through Omeka or YouTube, how are those things owned? So are they owned by the students, or are they being posted through an institutional account where the ownership kind of changes?
So in our case, it's an institutional account, but it's not officially the school account. So So a separate account what was created for this, the ehshistoryproject.org, as opposed to our domain, say is episcopalhighschool.org. And so, this is something that I feel like we're going to need to, explore in terms of, what does this mean in terms of, say, like copyright and that type of thing. I mean, I do know that when the parents sign the contract for the students for a student to attend Episcopal, say like any copyright is not retained by the student for, say, like work that they contribute to the student newspaper or the yearbook, and the school covers that by the contract. In terms of these projects, that's a good question, and I should probably look into that. But it is helpful, just I appreciate that this is getting me to think about that angle and what tools we might want to use to address that piece.
We've had different institutional repositories in the past that frankly can be quite expensive. So the oral history project, we were talking about different ways that we could present that. And we decided on YouTube because it was free, easily accessible to the students. It is an institutional account. It's the IUP Libraries account. And but it's open to the public. It can be accessed through Google. It's wonderful. It's something that I've been using for years for oral history interviews and video interviews, but it's been very interesting to try to get around the idea of a paid. I mean, everyone has different perspective on it. I try to have open access, free open access if we can, and the biggest problem we run into with an institutional repository is the expense. But we also, for the oral history interviews, we work with, I created a release form, and that makes it much easier they have to sign off on the idea of presenting or being interviewed.
So we have one final question for you both. Do students struggle with reading handwritten records? The skill of written script is slowly being lost, and I'm curious if this problem is coming up when working with students. If so, what can we do to make records more accessible?
Wow, this is such a great question. So my children are I have one in high school and one in college, and I do know that both of them were taught cursive. So I feel like I'm probably seeing the last few years of students who actually were taught cursive growing up. And I definitely anticipate this being an issue. We are lucky that the Blackford Diaries, who was a head of school, like I said, from 1870 to 1913, as Harrison mentioned, those were transcribed, and we have a copy of that transcription, and that's huge. We also have his letter books, and those are even now with kids who like grew up learning cursive. It's even though cursive is cursive, it's not all the same.
Laura brings up a good point. I from an archival point of view, it's kind of funny. I remember my great aunt Sally Bruce bringing the original diaries home to transcribe as a summer project. Can you imagine just lending out the originals to a family member to transcribe? And I find it funny because the transcriptions, and I have a copy of those transcribed diaries, they're definitely an improvement over the handwritten ones, because Dr. Blackford's handwriting was atrocious at best. I mean, compared to some, it's quite legible, but it's just one example. I mean, we found that with our projects, our students are it's a struggle. It is. So there was a point when handwriting was taught. I mean, cursive was taught in schools, and nowadays it's not. It isn't so much. Although I think they've reintroduced it, and it's kind of funny to think of. I've seen it with our own students that they are challenged by the idea of reading cursive handwriting on primary source documents. And with the journaling project especially, that was a real challenge for them, because many of those have not been transcribed, like Dr. Blackford's diaries. And it's a real blessing to have a transcription of something. But at the same time, I like the idea of challenging them to be able to read the cursive, because that's a lost art. It really is, especially decent handwriting, because my own is pretty bad too.
Well, I would like to thank you both so much for this presentation. There's a lot to think about and think about how to bring this back to our own archives. So for all of our attendees, there is a short break, and then there is one final vendor session. But otherwise, thank you so much for attending the MARAC Spring 2023 virtual conference. And we look forward to hearing what you all have to say about the conference. And thank you again to our presenters for great presentations.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you all. This has been great.